The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. I would not want to take you on in a video game.
I realized that on an essential level, everyone is the same. I already knew that before, but that on an essential level, people are not evil. And people just want to do good. And it's rather a lack of awareness that makes them do bad things. And the best way of achieving that is not through labeling and through judgment, but through understanding and acceptance. And when I say understanding and acceptance, I don't mean that you're just fine with what people do, the damage they cause to others, but just accepting the person for his mistakes on an emotional level. Because we have this tendency, mainly male have it. I would say masculinity translates into conceptualization, while femininity translates into more emotional. And as a result, when you listen to what I say, and you're a guy that thinks really much in concepts, and I talk about emotional nourishment and such, it's actually very hard to relate to it because you're thinking in concepts and you're not really imagining as much the emotional foundation that brings about these conceptualizations. And that's why even in communication, sometimes the best way to communicate and help someone and make someone really truly understand is through emotionally relating to them and have an emotional connection. Mainly guys, what you can do is you don't look at it from an emotional understanding point of view, but rather from a conceptual understanding point of view. And that's why there is so much miscommunication between genders and why women feel they're not being understood by men and why men feel like women cannot understand them. And the reason why that is because you have this masculinity which brings about conceptualization, analyze, hunter-gatherer kind of mindset where you really structure and analyze everything, while on the other hand you have this emotional, more feminine way of nourishing the family and nourishing, social bonds and understanding the feelings that bring about this other side of the coin. And both are required for a society to function properly. And what I did was, even though what I said was really all very correct, like I even talked about self-love, I talked about self-confidence and all these things, at the same time, the how, which is the emotional way of coming across, was really way too judgmental and basically went against what I was saying. So the how and the what have to go hand in hand, and the way of being able to even create that synergy is by understanding the emotions and also appreciating them and allowing them to grow as much as the practical side of things, the conceptual side of things, the more analytical side of things. It's actually quite fascinating because I've been thinking about it, whether you're more masculine or more feminine. It's defined by hormones. It's defined by testosterone or estrogen. So you have hormones that define also quite some behavioral patterns. But what's really fascinating about that is that there is a synergy between the hormones and the way you just nourish. And either way, you have the biological thing and you have the environment. And basically, if you grow up with a strong masculine father and a very feminine mother, you learn how to have both sides, and your hormone levels have this synergy with your environment and such. And it's all things that, it's quite a lot of research about it, but it's a very different thing to really understand this and be aware that and realize that if you don't take all these things into account when you deal with trying to help people to help themselves, you really get yourself in a position where you do more harm than good. And that's what I realized. What I realized is that with the Real Talk, even though I did help some people that could resonate and had a stronger emotional nourishment and went already through the emotional phases because of enough self-love and such, the people that were lacking behind, I was doing way more damage to them. And that is basically the majority of the world. The majority of this planet, definitely in the more technological advanced part of the world, really lack this emotional nourishment because we are quite clueless when it comes to that. But here comes a problem when you grow to a conceptual level, right? When you grow enough emotionally and you nourish your emotional need of self-love, self-confidence, self-trust. What happens is when your more primitive needs are satisfied, you go to the next layer of development. And you have Maslow's pyramid of needs, although it's not fully accurate, but hey, You got several needs you have to satisfy, but once you're emotionally satisfied, you can go more to the mind, be clear-headed, and use your conceptual thinking and cognitive empathy and such to understand the world. But the problem is, if you're emotionally not fully developed and fully nourished, you can very easily be stuck in that. And then when someone comes to you with concepts or with their more developed awareness or whatever, and he doesn't understand or she doesn't understand the need for love that you need, you can really create traumatized people where you really come into this cycle where you constantly judge yourself because you think you're not good enough. That's why I had constantly this ping pong duality throughout my live stream, because I knew for certain people what I was saying was actually working miracles, where people really understood what I was saying and such. And then you had other people that were just constantly trapped inside this loop where I see like, where is all this negativity coming from? Why are they hating? Why is this? Why that? And that's why I realized like emotional fulfillment and being able to emotionally feel fully calibrated is essential before you can even actualize yourself on a more rational level. So the question now is, of course, like, yeah, okay, that's really nice. Like, but it's important for both, because I know there's certain people watching the stream that have already gotten enough self-love and don't even understand how that's a big deal. And the best way of me being able to explain it is like, really imagine if you would go to life where you would really have been bullied or where you really have been pushed down by your parents all the time, and you wouldn't be able to do what you wanted to do, and you were always punished. Like, imagine what kind of awareness you would have, how it would affect your emotional stability and stuff, because that's really the problem with our reptilian brain, or the problem with our really gut intuition, is that we just take for granted what we have. Like, it almost doesn't exist, even though it's crucial, and that's how we managed to evolve. There is, of course, many reasons why that is, but when it comes down to understanding, we don't get to assume these things are there when they're actually components. It's not because all our computers have a CPU that we can just take the CPU for granted. And then when the computer doesn't work, we don't even look whether or not he has a CPU. Like, if you want to help others, it's important to understand all components that makes a fulfilled person, a fulfilled being. And you cannot use your awareness to impose your way of looking at people with a different awareness, because that is you being inside your head. It's not looking at reality for what it is. You got to go about things always based on each person's awareness separately and see how you can nurture them to the extent where they can start nurturing themselves, because that is the key. The key is to find a way to get to people to a point where they can help themselves. So help people to help themselves, because then with the right resources and stuff and the right knowledge, they will find their way. That's why this information is very important, even for people that are more emotionally actualized, as much as for people that aren't as much emotionally actualized, to understand how it works, because it makes us understand each other. It makes us understand better children. It makes us understand better parents. It makes us understand better genders, different genders. Our ability to understand how we work, our ability to emotionally also understand how we work is crucial. And that's the problem that I had before. When I was always talking about understanding, I was always coming from this more clear-headed perspective where I'm really reasonable and where I use all these concepts and I can really explain my emotions very well. But what I was taking out of the equation was that for being understood, you also need to feel understood. And feeling understood is an emotional process more than a conceptual one. So me saying these things in a certain context won't help as much as, for example, me actually being there for you and truly listening to you and really understanding you and really like making you understand that there is nothing wrong with you, and really make you understand that it is fine to be where you are. It's fine to make mistakes, because that's also something that I realized quite a bit. My mother always gave me the room to fuck up. In retrospect, it's a gift. It's a gift to be able to have your own experience and look at someone and allow them to make a mistake. Because what I would do is like, yeah, but why would I want that person to make a mistake? If I can avoid that person to make a mistake, I want him to avoid it. But the thing is, if you're still in the experience phase of your life where you're emotionally being nourished and you don't understand so much conceptualizations and stuff when you're still a child, to put it that way, then making mistakes can help you grow. Of course, you can still wonder, like, what if the mistakes go at the cost of other people? That's when you need to find certain ways to overcome the damage and to avoid that from happening. But when it just comes to living your life and making mistakes, allowing people to make mistakes, or children to make mistakes more so, gives them so much room to grow. Because that's really like, when I went through life and when I look back, I always had this freedom to express myself, to try out stuff. And I would understand and realize if my mother would be much more protective, and control freak, basically, then every single mistake that I would make, she would really blame me, make me judge myself, and literally cut away all my inner confidence, all this inner passion of understanding the world. She would cut it away and make me literally complete slave for her validation or for her acknowledgement, which really blocks away completely my creativity and my ability to actualize myself. So the ability to just understand that really allows you to be a better parent, to be a better mother, to be a better father, to be a better friend. And that's why I'm explaining this from both sides, because I know that you have this duality where when you come about things more conceptually, you don't really understand why people have to go through mistakes, why they have to experience it. I never really understood that. I sometimes look at history repeating itself and I say, why do we have to repeat the same mistakes as in the past? It makes no sense. But it's because I'm emotionally nourished. If you're emotionally not nourished, you have to go through the experience. And then the best way of going about it is in a way where you're not a kid that grows up with guns. You go through that emotional nourished process when you're younger, and if you're older, you get in an environment or you get people around you that can nourish you properly, that can understand you properly in a way that you're fine with making mistakes. And don't judge yourself or don't beat yourself up over it, because it only does more harm than good. And I know that if I would have this conversation with myself, because that's really what I like to do, if I would have this conversation with myself, I would say like, but Athene, what are you talking about? It makes no sense, because if people do more damage with their behavior, then you need some structure, you need conceptualized framework, reason, rationality to avoid more damage from happening. But the thing is though, if I didn't talk to my own previous self, I would say like, yeah, but that's how you do overcome more damage. Because if you try to control and really manipulate people or push them in a certain direction, you're not solving the cause, you're only treating the symptoms in a way that is not long-term scalable. And that's the problem. And then I would say like my older self, I would say like, yeah, but that's easy to say. I have saved all these lives and stuff. And if I wouldn't have had this approach, then I wouldn't have had the impact that I had. And then if I would talk, I would say like, yeah, that's not fully accurate, because if you would be able to find a way to turn people into these nourished people that can grow and actualize themselves, then rather than just you having to look at your achievements, you would actually make a ripple effect where other people are creators and have an achievement themselves. But then what I would say is like, yeah, but if that is the case, you're giving people too much credit. You're assuming that when you give people the ability to make mistakes and to actually just be who they are, that they won't take advantage. I mean, we live in a time where freedom and the ability to be who you are is more praised than anything, and yet still we live in a shithole. But then what I would say is like, yeah, but that's because you're looking at it from a conceptual perspective and you miss out the fundamental foundation of what brings about a stable person, which is the emotional framework. If a person is emotionally not nourished, then obviously he won't be able to grow and have this clear-headed and focus that you have, and you're taking that for granted. Like when you grew up and when you had all this love from your parents, you assume that this is a prerequisite for everyone and everybody has it, but that's not true. So being able to give that to people is essential. Then what I would say to myself is like, yeah, but that doesn't stop the damage that these people are causing, and you have to do something about that. The reality setting shows that you have to make sure that you stop the damage, and at the end of the day, reality overrides emotions anyway. You can say all these things, you can talk about emotional nourishment or whatever, but reality at the end of the day, if you don't have food, you starve. But then if I would have to answer that question, I would say like, yeah, but your ability to be and to do what you do is only because of the emotional nourishment you've had. And if you wouldn't have had it yourself, you would have been part of this problem that you're now trying to combat. So being able to actually truly help people to grow emotionally is fundamental to even your way of going about life. But then what I would say, my older version, I would say like, yeah, but to which extent can you even overcome that? To which extent, sometimes you have to just look at reality for what it is and just accept, okay, these people might be broken. And then what I would tell him, and that's where I would hit my previous self, I would say like, but that's because of a lack of understanding. It's because you don't know how to help people to emotionally nourish them, and that's why you don't trust them. And that's when I would get hit. I would say like, but so basically you're telling me that people on a fundamental level want to be good, and if they're emotionally nourished, they would just be like me. And I would say like, yes. It's because of a lack of awareness. And I would then ask myself, but how do you do that then? Because I've been trying so much. I've had people working on love, even in this building. But then I would say like, no, you haven't had people work on love and self-trust and all this. You have had people work to be productive and use this love and all this development as a way to become productive. But the problem with that is that you're not truly creating an environment without judgment and without expectations when you tell them this is what you need to do. People are not truly building on their own self-love and their trust when they have this gloomy expectation layer on top of that forces them to be productive. And then they will never really truly allow themselves to give themselves to actualize, to be creative, because they constantly have this checkup of like, oh, Daddy Athene might kick me out or whatever. And that's the thing, like the problem is when it all arises, all the issues and all the doubt that I had when it comes down to reality was mainly a failure myself, was my own failure. It was not the failure of people, because people are just the way they are. It was a failure on my part because I had a lack of understanding, and it made me doubt in people's essence of being good. And as a result, what I did was I even warped it to the extent where I thought it was a choice. I thought it was a choice because I can choose, but that is just a result of me being inside my head. When people have a low awareness, does a child choose to be evil? I would say, of course not. Well, imagine these children staying children as they grow up. But I say like, but they develop an advanced, more rational part of the brain. That doesn't add up, right? But then I would say like, but their emotional part is behind. So of course they will just use their reason to find what they lack emotionally. They will never get fully, truly developed. And that's the thing, like being able to emotionally nourish people allows them to grow from within, to get to a point where they become more clear-headed and clear-minded, and then change and doing good comes naturally. And that's really something that I didn't realize because I didn't know how to do it. And this is fascinating part. If you grow in awareness and you grow into understanding things and emotionally you're more and more fulfilled and you start more using cognitive empathy and really understand things more from conceptualizing things, you assume that you can just explain to people what the problem is, just as much as I'm doing right now. I used to assume that I could just explain you guys the problem and it's fixed, but that's bullshit. A lot of the people that are watching right now this stream, the only way that I can truly help you is by emotionally relating to you guys and by guiding you guys to your own emotional blockades. And it's only then that you can actualize yourself. Of course, I can give some tips where you can really follow the emotion and try to understand where it comes from by just experiencing it more and more, and really not judge yourself and don't have expectations and accept yourself for who you are, love yourself, accept you for even the mistakes. But that requires you to really follow the emotions, and in order to even do so, it requires to be understood, to be accepted. Of course, I'm trying to do the best thing right now to explain these things and to help you guys in order to really trust in yourself and really believe, because even people that don't want to help themselves, it's a symptom. It's because on a fundamental level, you feel like, why help yourself? Not worth it. So getting love and getting this understanding and getting someone that truly listens to you on an emotional level can really help you open up. That's why I also said that I would love to be there for you guys, because now I understand it. I understand what you guys need, what you guys lack. Some of you, not all of you. And I understand how I can help in that regards. Although I do think that these streams might be helpful, because if you guys really look up to me, or some people look up to me, I'm just telling you guys, it's important to understand that there ain't nothing wrong with you. You don't have to judge yourself. Allow yourself to be and allow yourself to make some mistakes, and just don't run away from your fears. Try to experience them, go at them, and don't label yourself, don't judge yourself. Because even in my language, when I say don't run away, maybe when you then play games, you go like, oh, I'm running away, I'm bad. No, just experience the emotion. Go try to find it out where it comes from, and by experiencing them, you can overcome so much. That's what I realized, and once that is done, and when you become more conceptually oriented and focused, not only will action come automatically, but also a lot of the insights that I talk about, you will just come up with it themselves. And then even if you feel like having a big impact or working with like-minded people, you just come over and apply and have an impact here. But all these things come naturally. It's not like I have to apply, I have to go there, or I'm not responsible or whatever. The sense of responsibility is something that grows from within.
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow The Real Athene on Snapchat.